would like me to repeat it, if you would just let me know, I'll be happy to do that for you, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. I think you told Mr. Newman that you graduated from the academy. I wasn't sure, did you say 2015?
Yes, sir, January.
So how long had you been a trooper on the occasion of April the 11th when you came into contact with my client, Mr. Casey?
Approximately 4 months.
4 months. And I know you said you had some training at the academy. Did you say it was about 1 week's worth of training on DUI detection?
We spent 1 week, I think is what it was. It's entirely DUI training.
And of course, you had other training at the academy. How many week process is it at the academy? 23. So 1 week of the 23 was DUI and the other 22 were other things.
Yes, sir, but I will also tell you that during that other 23 weeks, during some of that time, the DUI issues come back up. And so it's intense for 1 week, and then there's other times that we'll deal with it.
Well, I understand DUI issues come up, but do they bring in retraining for you on, for example, you talked about field sobriety tests like horizontal gaze, nystagmus,
No, sir.
Or walk and turn?
No, sir.
No, it's
Primarily
just,
that
that's
1 week.
during that 1 week.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Newman asked you,
Brian?
He's not in here.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Newman asked you about the training manual, and I'd like to show you what's labeled the DUI detection and standardized field sobriety testing that is promulgated by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Was this the manual you were trained on?
Honestly, I'm not sure. We did not receive an actual copy of the manual. We received documents and stuff that were we used on our computers and through PowerPoints.
Right,
To
but I
receive,
think-
say I received an actual manual.
Okay, but I think you told Mr. Newman that it was I'm going to refer to as NHTSA, National Highway Traffic, the NHTSA manual.
I recall NHTSA stuff being brought up, so I think
Alright.
that was probably one.
Sure. And as part of the NHTSA manual, do you recall that when we're talking about field sobriety procedures, that the manual in the largest print in the manual itself, in other words, we have pages of regular size print, and then we have the largest print in the manual says it's necessary to emphasize this validation applies only when, 1, the tests are administered in a prescribed, standardized manner. Do you recall that?
Not specifically, no, sir.
2, the standardized clues are used to assess the suspect's performance. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And that would mean to you that the clues that you're taught to look for are what you're going to assess the individual on as to whether they did well or did poorly, correct?
Yes, sir.
The standardized criteria are employed to interpret that performance.
I agree with that.
You agree with that. And finally, it says if any one of the standardized field sobriety test elements is changed, the validity is compromised. You remember that from the manual?
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. Let's take this back for a second to the beginning. It's my understanding that when you went to the academy, that you were trained at the academy. And is one of the things that they teach you at the academy to take good notes?
Yes, sir.
So, and the reason for that would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Officer McCormick, is that when you come to court to testify, if you don't remember everything, you refer to your uniform citation and you refer to the notes that you took.
That's
Correct?
Yes, sir.
Would you tell the jury whether or not you believe your recollection of the events with Mr. Kasich are better today on September 11th, 2015, or were better on April the 11th, 2015?
They would have been better April 11th.
When you wrote it down, correct?
Yes, sir.
Because surely you have had other interactions with citizens, perhaps other DUI arrests after April 11th. Is that possible?
It's not only possible, it's correct.
Could you tell the jury how many you've had since April the 11th?
I don't know the exact number, but it'd be more than 10.
More than 10.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and how about prior to April 11th, you said you had been on the Kentucky State Police for, I believe, 4 months.
Yes, sir.
So how many did you have before that?
It would be a guess, but it would just be a few. We spent first almost probably 8 weeks or maybe a little bit more with the field training officer. So I was riding with somebody else. Sometimes the training officer would drive, sometimes I would drive. But typically, with the state police, we're by ourselves, like I am now, so.
I understand. You recall how long you were training with someone else and riding with someone else?
6 to 8 weeks.
6 to 8 weeks. So 2 months of your first 4 months, you were with a training officer?
Approximately that time, yes, sir.
All right. And at the academy, did you have any other manuals that you trained on besides the NHTSA manual?
With respect to DUI or everything in general?
In respect to everything in general?
No, we have lots of.
Lots of manuals. And in respect to DUI, is it true that you also had what's called the A-Ride manual, which is Advanced Roadside Impaired Driving Enforcement Training, while at the Academy's standard course, A-Ride?
I don't know about that name, but based on the description you just gave with that title, I would say yes.
Well, I'd like to refer you to the A-Ride manual on page 17, where it says, and just to see if it will refresh your recollection, it says in the manual, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. Would you disagree with what the manual says?
Yes,
You would.
I would.
And please tell the jury how you would disagree.
Well, there's lots of things that, for example, that may have occurred with Mr. Kasich and I that evening, but I didn't write every single word down or every single incident.
Going back to your training, didn't they tell you to take good notes at the academy so that if you had to come to court to testify, you would have something to refer to?
Yes, sir, but those notes were to not only to help refresh your memory, it wasn't to write everything down.
And so I'm gonna leave this, but you would disagree with the manual where it says if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen?
I would disagree.
Thank you. As part of your training and at the academy, is it true that you were trained to testify in court?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And they told you how to testify persuasively so that the jury would believe you. Is that part of the training?
No, sir. We're taught to tell the truth and chips fall where they may.
So you'll disagree with me when I tell you that you were trained and the manual says how to testify persuasively so that the jury will believe you, that that's not in the manual?
I can't tell you if it's in the manual or not.
Do they tell you how to sit, how to hold your hands, how to make gestures? Wasn't that part of the training?
Not that I recall. I mean, act respectfully, dress appropriately.
Well, if I were to pull the manual out right now and show you page number, section 4, page 4, those exact words are in there that I just asked you about, making gestures, making eye contact. Would you agree with me that it's in the manual?
Making eye contact, I can guarantee that we're trained in. Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you ever testified in court before?
I've not been in trial before. I've testified in court, but preliminary hearing.
And in terms of on your citation, would you agree with me that nowhere on the citation does it say that you received information from any other source involving Mr. Kasich? In other words, that you didn't receive a call from dispatch? It's not, I'm not saying you didn't, I'm saying it's not on the citation.
That's correct.
That is correct, it's not there.
It's not on the.
And when you first came into contact with Mr. Kasich, and did he pull his car over appropriately? In other words, when you activated your emergency equipment, did he pull over?
Yes, sir.
And when you were talking to him, did he act in any way, shape, or form disrespectfully to you when you first met him?
For the first minute or so, no, sir, it wasn't.
Okay. And did you ask him for his operator's license, proof of insurance, and registration?
Yes, sir.
And did he give them to you?
He did.
Was there any problem with that?
No, sir.
All right. In terms of the citation, you said that you observed the driver cross the center line on 2 separate occasions, is that right? All right. Now, you started off by testifying that Mr. Kasich was driving, and don't let me state this incorrectly, on US 42, but he turned on to US 41, is that correct?
US 421.
421, thank you. And that you followed him for approximately 2 miles, I think you said?
Yes, sir.
And during the course of that traveling, you said that he wasn't speeding, correct?
He was not speeding?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, but you had received information from dispatch or from somewhere that the car was speeding and driving recklessly, did you not say that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but you weren't observing any of that. You weren't observing speeding, and you weren't observing reckless driving. I'll talk about touching the lines here in a minute.
I did not witness that, but I was behind him.
Not sure I understand. Did you just say you were behind him?
I was behind him when I witnessed him driving
Right, that's what I'm saying, for 2 miles.
for 2 miles. Yeah.
Okay, and would you be stating it factually, the reason you were following him for the 2 miles was to see how he was driving?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Now, you did say that he crossed the center line on 2 separate occasions, did you not?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, the type of roadway that you're on 421 at this point, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is that just a straight shot roadway, or does it have curves, and does it meander? I'm not sure what word I should use.
It has some curves, there are some straightaways, but it is, it's hilly.
It's hilly?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and is it, I'm asking, 2 double yellow lines because it's a 2-lane road or a 4-lane road, what is it?
It's 2 yellow lines, and occasionally there'll be passing zones, I would call it passing zones.
But it's a 2-lane highway.
It's a 2-lane highway, yes, sir.
And have you ever, in your experience as a Kentucky State Trooper, seen somebody that's driving down the road touch the yellow line?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there a law against touching the yellow line?
No, sir.
Okay. So, and is there a law against touching the yellow line 2 or 3 times?
Not specific to my knowledge, no.
So over the course of 2 miles, you said, and I believe you said, that he crossed the center line on 2 separate occasions. Is
Yes, sir.
that correct?
Yes, sir.
But he didn't, you said he did not cross over into the other lane.
The question was, did he cross over into the middle of the lane? And I said, no, he didn't go that far.
Okay. He stayed within his driving lane.
Well, no, he crossed into the other portion of the, but he didn't go very far. He would
Okay.
have crossed completely over the double yellow line.
I'm sorry, I couldn't
He
understand.
would have crossed completely over the double yellow line partially before coming back to his own lane travel.
Okay. And I know that the jury will recall your prior testimony that you said he did not cross over, but now you're saying he did cross over?
No, so the question was asked, did he cross into the middle of the other traffic lane? I said he did not.
Okay, I'm not trying to fool you here, officer, let me ask the question a different way. You said in your citation he crossed the center line.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, would you agree with me if there's 2 yellow lines separating one lane of travel from the other, that the second yellow line, if you crossed over that, you would be in the oncoming lane of traffic?
Yes.
Okay. You're not testifying that he crossed over the second yellow line and was in oncoming traffic, are you?
He did cross over into the other lane, but just not very far.
Okay. But you initially said he did not cross over. Now that you've had some time to think about it, you're changing your testimony?
No, sir. The question posed by the prosecutor was, he asked me if he crossed over into the middle of the oncoming lane. I said he did not go that far.
Eventually, you stopped his car, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you said that when you stopped him, one of the first things you noticed was the smell of alcohol. Is that correct?
Once he rolled the window down, yes, sir.
Okay. And would you describe to the jury about this smell of alcohol, please? What did you smell?
It smells like someone has been drinking. I've been around enough people that I could detect that. And in our training, we actually have people that drink, and we practice tests on them as well.
let me ask you this then. Could you tell from the smell how many, could it be possible, officer, that in your opinion and history of doing this, that someone could have a smell of alcohol, but yet be sober as a judge?
That is possible, yes, sir.
If I were to tell you, officer, that pure alcohol has absolutely no smell, would you disagree with me?
No.
So you're not really smelling alcohol, you're smelling the additive to the drink, whether it be from the flavoring that beer gets from hops or bourbon gets from the charred barrel, correct?
I guess that would be accurate.
So then, if it doesn't have any odor, how can you tell how much alcohol was consumed just by smelling it?
You cannot, that's what the
Cannot.
purpose of the testing.
Thank you. You did say that Mr. Kasich told you that he had 2 glasses of wine, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did he tell you if they were red wine or white wine?
Not that I recall.
Did you make any notation on your uniform citation?
No, sir.
You would agree with me that if someone was going to admit to you that they were drinking alcohol, that it would be important to make notes about the alcohol they were consuming, would you not?
Well, he told me it was wine, that was specific enough for me.
But that's as far as you went. Okay. Would you also agree with me in your training, officer, that you have seen other people who you have arrested and charged with driving under the influence have bloodshot eyes, glassy red eyes? Have you ever noticed that in anybody?
Yes, sir.
Did you notice that in Mr. Kasich?
I don't believe so.
Okay, you don't believe so. Would that have been something important that you would have noted on your uniform citation had you noticed it?
I believe, yes, sir, I think so.
But you'll agree with me, it's not there.
I agree.
So that was not something that you noticed. How about his speech? Was he slurring his words? Were you having any difficulty understanding him?
It was, Mr. Kasich was different from typical that we pull over, especially in rural Trimble County. He had a very strong accent. So it was hard to tell.
My question was he slurring his words?
I could not tell due to the accent, I don't know.
Would you like to take a look at your uniform citation and see if you made any notes as to him slurring his words?
There is no notation.
Okay, but you did ask him a number of questions, correct?
Yes, sir.
So you asked him how much he weighed, for example.
That's on the citation. I don't recall asking that at the roadside.
How would you know if you didn't ask him? Were you just putting information in there because you were,
It's on his driver's license.
if I told you, officer, that in the Commonwealth of Kentucky there is no weight on the driver's license, would you have any reason to disagree with me?
No, that's something I may have asked. We were with each other
All
for an
right.
extended
Well,
period of time.
did you ask him if he was single or married? You have under marital status married.
Then I must have asked him.
Okay, did you have any problem understanding him?
Not the word married, no, sir.
Okay, well, would you point out to me anywhere on this citation where you had difficulty and you noted that I couldn't understand him?
It's not noted, I'm just recalling it.
But of course, we've already talked about this, that if it's not written down, it may not have happened, correct?
Those are your words, yes, sir.
Thank you. Did you, in terms of the field sobriety procedures, did you give Mr. Kasich any opportunity to practice them before you gave them?
Practice the field sobriety
Sure.
test?
So this is what I'm gonna ask you to do. I'm gonna give you a few minutes to practice it because it would be unfair to ask you to do something like this without giving you some background.
I didn't give them per se as practice, but for instance, the one-legged stand test, he took it 6 times.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, but I think your answer was you didn't give him any practice rounds.
No, sir.
All right. And let's talk a little bit about the place where all of this was done, the location, okay?
Yes, sir.
I understand from the questions that Mr. Newman asked you, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, that it was a gravel area?
There was gravel, but there was also some pavement parts to it.
Well, I'm asking you where you gave the field sobriety test, because you talked about walk and turn and one leg stand, and I'd like to know, was that on the gravel?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Okay, so would you agree with me that the manual says that the place for a field sobriety test, like walk and turn or one leg stand, should be a fairly flat, dry, level surface? Is that what the manual says?
I believe so, yes, sir.
And knowing that there was gravel there, but yet you say there was another area that was not gravel, wouldn't it have been better to give him the field sobriety test on the area that wasn't gravel?
The pavement parts were very small, and for instance, to do the walk and turn test, I don't believe there was enough.
How about the one leg stand? Was there enough room to stand on one leg on this pavement?
That's possible, yes, sir.
So in order to be fair, you could have given it to him on the flat surface, but you did not, correct?
Which test? All the tests?
One
were done
leg
for
stand.
that, yes, sir.
Okay, we'll talk about the horizontal gauge nystagmus in a minute. Matter of fact, I think for our purposes, we will go to the horizontal gauge nystagmus. Now, you testified, and just so I understand, that this is some form of an eye test, correct?
Those are my words, yes, sir.
I'm sorry?
Those are the words I use,
All
yes,
right.
sir.
Well, to be fair, and I really would like to be fair, you are not licensed anywhere in Kentucky or America to diagnose eye dysfunction, are you?
No, sir.
And are you educated enough and have background to determine the physiological causes of nystagmus?
No, sir, I just administered as we're trained.
Exactly, and we're gonna talk about that in a second. How many times have you qualified as an expert in court on the physiology of the eye?
0.
And you don't know a whole lot about physiological effects of alcohol on eye musculature, do you?
No, sir.
All right. And you said that you received your training at the academy, correct?
Yes, sir.
Could you tell the members of the jury how many hours of eye dysfunction, HGN, you had?
It would be a guess, but an hour or two at the most.
An hour or two at the most, okay. And did you get the same training as any other police officer?
Our academy's separate from the other academies in
No,
the
no, I'm
state.
talking about at the academy on eye dysfunction. People that were in the room with you, did you all get the same training?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. And who are your teachers?
They are certified academy instructors. They're other state troopers.
Okay, there are other police officers, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and did you have any training from qualified physicians?
No, sir.
Okay.
Well,
And,
not in this area, no.
no, yeah, I'm only talking about the eyes now.
Yes, sir.
So it was other police officers that trained you on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And, officer, tell the jury exactly what does cause nystagmus?
I don't know.
Okay. I appreciate your candor. Would you agree with me that you were trained that there are a large number of things that can cause nystagmus besides alcohol?
We were trained that there's other issues with nystagmus, yes, sir.
Isn't it true that some people normally have nystagmus?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it true that someone with perhaps hypertension, that could cause nystagmus?
I recall that, yes, sir.
All right, how about motion sickness, such as in a car?
I don't know that.
How about caffeine,
Caffeine, I believe I recall that as well.
nicotine,
I don't know.
aspirin,
I don't know.
fatigue,
I'm not sure of that.
allergies?
I don't know.
But you would agree that there are dozens of other reasons why someone can have the early onset of nystagmus, could you not?
There are other issues, yes, sir.
All right. And did you ask Mr. Kasich if he was suffering from any of the things we just talked about? Hypertension, caffeine, motion sickness?
I think the only thing I asked him was if he was wearing
And the fact that you only asked him that, is that noted on your uniform citation?
No, sir, but that's something we're just kind of trained to ask.
Okay.
That's because the contacts sometimes will come out, but they may lose them.
Was he wearing glasses?
I don't recall.
Thank you. Let's talk about the nystagmus procedure. Tell me exactly what you asked my client to do when trying to determine whether or not he had nystagmus.
I asked him to, he was standing, I asked him to hold his head still and follow the tip of my finger with his eyes and his eyes open.
Okay, now, follow the tip of my finger is what you said.
Yes, sir.
At what distance did you hold your finger in front of his face? What are you trained? What is the standardized criteria for doing HGN? What distance?
I don't recall the exact distance,
Don't
but
recall.
mine would have been, one, there's a safety issue involved. You don't want
Yes,
to get
sir.
too close, but I would say approximately maybe 2 feet,
2 feet.
maybe a little closer.
Okay, so if I were to tell you that the manual specifically instructs you to do it 12 to 15 inches, would you disagree with that?
I don't know if that's what it says or not. If you say that's what it says, then
I'll be happy to show you the manual and show it to you if you would like, but remember that you must use the standardized criteria to interpret the performance, and the standardized criteria is 12 to 15 inches. You're also supposed to ask the subject to stand with their feet together with their hands by their side. You didn't mention that. Are you aware that's the way the HGN is supposed to be done?
Yes, sir, I believe I don't think his feet were together, but his hands were by his side.
Well, if his feet were not together, you were supposed to tell him to do so, correct? That's part of the actual setup for the HGN procedure.
Okay.
Officer, what is the first thing that you're trained to do at the academy when you're starting the HGN procedure? What are you supposed to do?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
What I'm asking you, that day on April the 11th, when you had my client on the side of the road, what did you do to administer the HGN? What's the first thing in your training that's supposed to take place?
Safety's first. I gave him the instructions,
Right.
and then asked him to follow the tip of my finger, not move his head. And I moved my finger from side to side, and to a point it was a 45-degree angle on either side. So
Would you agree with me, officer, that the manual teaches you the first thing you're supposed to do is check for equal tracking?
I'm not sure I know what equal tracking is.
Okay, well, that's fine. Would you also agree with me that the manual says that you're supposed to check before you do anything else for equal pupil size?
No, sir.
No? Is that what you said?
I'm saying I'm not aware of that.
Not aware of that. Would you agree with me if you're aware that the reason you're checking for equal pupil size is because you've been taught if the pupils are not equal, the individual may be suffering from something else, for example, a head injury or a concussion or a medical emergency, and that the manual says if the pupils are not equal, then you should stop immediately and call 911 for emergency equipment to arrive to take the person to the hospital.
Not familiar with the equal pupil.
All right. How many clues are there for HGN?
I do not know the exact number.
So if I were to tell you that there's a total of 6 clues, would you have any reason to disagree with me?
No, sir.
And how can you score somebody if you don't know how many clues are supposed to be reported?
Through our training, and through training on people that are actually at different levels of intoxication while at the academy, it's based through practice and experience.
Okay, well, practice and experience, but you will agree with me that you had only been out 4 months and the experience wasn't that great, correct?
It would not be as much as someone that had been on longer, yes, sir.
Well, how long does it take to complete the entire horizontal gaze nystagmus procedure?
How long did it take for me?
When
I
you,
did it, was
yes,
Mr.
yes, sir.
Maybe a minute at the most.
A minute at the most?
Yes, sir.
And if I were to tell you that you're supposed to procedurally through the manual first check for equal tracking, then check for smooth pursuit, then check for maximum deviation, and then check for the onset angle of nystagmus, that it could not possibly be done in less than 82 seconds, would you have any reason to disagree with me?
No, sir.
Thank you. Officer, do you know what VGN is?
No.
Okay, so if I were to tell you that VGN is vertical gaze nystagmus, we just talked about horizontal, but vertical gaze nystagmus is this. Would you disagree with me when I tell you the manual says in order for the HGN to be valid, you must conduct VGN?
I'm not aware of that.
Let's move on to the second field sobriety test that you said you gave my client, Mr. Kasich. And I believe that was the walk and turn, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would you do me a favor? Would you stand up and would you show the jury how you instructed Mr. Kasich to perform the walk and turn? In other words, what did you tell him? This is what I want you to do, and this is how you're to do it.
Yes, sir. I told him to keep his hands down to his side,
Okay.
and then he was to walk 10 steps, heel to toe. I did not walk all 10 of the steps,
How many did you walk?
maybe 5, 6 at most.
Okay. And then, please continue, I'm sorry.
And then I told him how he was supposed to turn.
Yeah, but tell the jury how he's supposed to turn.
That you're supposed to keep your last foot that was planted down, and if you were to turn on the ball foot, make your turn. So you're back facing the opposite direction you came. Do heel to toe, 10 steps back.
Okay. Thank you very much, I appreciate that. Is it not true that the manual says that when you are instructing someone on the walk and turn, that you're to tell them to place the left foot on the line, whether it be real or imaginary, and put your right heel against the toe of the left foot, and stay in that position until you're asked to do the procedure? Isn't that the way it's taught you in the manual?
That may be what the manual says, but I don't recall that as being the starting,
I don't recall that as what.
being the starting instructions as we were trained.
Okay, well, that's what the manual says, and I'll be happy to show it to you if you'd like.
No, sir, that's what you're saying.
And again, these are the tests are to be administered in the prescribed standardized manner, because when they did these tests, they had students and they did recording and all of that, because would you agree if someone were to change the prescribed standardized manner, then it really wouldn't be a test, because you're just making it up as you go along? Would you not agree with that?
Not entirely, no, sir. I'm not sure why starting with the left foot or right foot matters.
I'm not sure either, but it is what the manual says, so I figured you're supposed to do it the way the manual says. Did the manual not also say to place your arms by your sides?
Yes, sir, he was instructed to do that.
And doesn't the manual not say that you have to ask the subject if they understand what you're telling them?
Yes, sir.
Because they've never heard this before. I don't want you to walk heel to toe. Okay, now, how many clues are there on the walk and turn? Tell me the total number of clues that one is looking for according to the manual.
I have no idea how many clues there is.
So, if I were to tell you that there are 8 clues to look for, would you have any reason to disagree?
No, sir.
All right. And if I tell you, I know you mentioned on a couple of occasions that the individual is supposed to take 10 steps, correct?
Yes, sir.
If I were to tell you the manual says 9 steps, would you have any reason to disagree with me?
No, sir.
And can you tell the jury any of the clues? I know you noticed 2, I think, didn't go heel to toe, and improper turn.
Yes, sir.
So how far apart on heel to toe can you not touch and still be in conformity with what the manual says?
So again, I don't know the exact distance that the manual prescribes.
Okay, so if I told you the manual says as long as you're within a half an inch, that's, okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, there is a total of, well, the manual would say 18 steps, you say 20, 10 forward and 10 back. Are you telling the jury that you have a recording somewhere of which heel-to-toe steps you didn't touch heel-to-toe on?
I do not have recording.
Okay. And you said improper turn. In terms of the improper turn, would you tell the jury how he turned improperly? And please refer to your notes on your citation to tell the jury.
It's not in there, I'd have to go from, it's not written down, I'd have to go from memory.
Is there any other writing that you took? Any other writing that you wrote down?
No, sir.
And you don't have a video, correct?
Correct.
It would be very helpful for the jury to see the video of everything you're describing,
Yes, sir.
but you don't have one.
No, sir.
All right. And let's just say, for example, let's say I give you that he didn't do properly on those two.
Yes, sir.
Would you agree with me there's 6 more clues that you're looking for? That's what the manual says, total of 8.
I'm agreeing that you say that there's 8 in the manual, I don't know.
Okay. Of the other 6, if he had done poorly on any of them, would you have noted that on your citation?
I would think so, but not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Officer, would you agree with me that I think you said earlier that you're trying to be fair and give the benefit of the doubt? Did you write down anything that he did good on your citation?
No, sir.
No, okay. So for things like he didn't start too soon, or he didn't stop while he was walking, or he didn't step off the line, or he didn't use his arms to balance, or he took the wrong number, all of those other clues, he did fine, or you would have written them down.
Not necessarily, but there would be some truth to that as well, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the one-leg stand. Before I forget, would you tell the jury, if I'm correct or incorrect, that the manual says that if someone is over 65 years old or 50 pounds overweight, they shouldn't be doing walk and turn or one-leg stand to begin with? Isn't that what the manual says?
Again, I can't tell you the exact age what the manual says. If that's what you says it is, then.
Well, and I appreciate that. Can you tell me if my client was born in 1943, and this is being done in 2015, he would be over 65 years old, would he not?
Yes, sir, I believe it was
All right.
70s.
Thank you. One leg stand. Tell me what instructions you gave to Mr. Kasich about the one leg stand. What did you tell him in the instruction stage as to what he should be doing?
Stand on 2 feet with his hands to his side, looking forward, raise the foot of your choice off the ground approximately 10 inches.
Can I ask you, I'm only asking about the instruction stage. Let me just ask you, I think you just said stand with your hands to your side.
Yes, sir.
That is one of the instructions. Would you agree with me? That's part of the instruction?
Not familiar with that.
Okay. And maintain that position until told to do otherwise?
Yes, sir.
And aren't you supposed to, according to the manual, ask them, do you understand?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, you were talking about the balance in the counting stage. Would you go ahead and repeat that again? What was your instructions to him?
To raise the foot of his choice off the ground approximately 10 inches and count to 30.
Okay. And did you tell him, as the manual instructs, to keep your foot pointed out?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you tell him to keep both legs straight and arms at your side? So instead of doing this kind of, balancing on one leg, keep your legs straight and do it this way?
I remember telling him to keep his hands to his side, but I don't know that I gave him a straight leg instruction.
Did you tell him to look down at his elevated foot as the manual instructs?
I don't recall saying that.
Now, you said that in your citation that he did not test correctly, he put his foot down at 10 seconds. Is that what it says?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, did he do anything else in terms of not passing that test?
That happened multiple occasions.
Okay. would you agree with me that the manual says that for someone not to pass that particular test, they have to have 2 clues, okay? Would you agree or disagree?
Again, if you're saying that's what it says,
Well, could you tell me, other than putting your foot down, what other clues the manual says you're supposed to be looking for?
follow directions, keeping numbers in sequence, keeping hands to side, not putting your foot down. Not sure how
Okay,
you
well, no, that was very good, but if I told you that that's not any of the clues that the manual says, would you agree with me? The manual says you're supposed to note if someone is swaying.
Yes, sir. I
How
would agree.
about whether or not they hop? Isn't that one of the clues, whether they're hopping? According to the manual.
Yes, but in my instruction, I told her to raise 1 foot off, keep 1 on the ground.
Right, but sometimes people might be trying to do it like this. 1 foot here, oh boy, I'm
Yeah.
not able to do it. That's called hopping, is it not?
That would obviously be the
Okay,
problem.
but that's one of the clues, is it not?
Yes, sir.
All right. How about, uses his arms to balance, so you know they're standing here on one, oh.
Yes, sir. I agree with that.
But none of this is noted.
No, sir.
Okay. All right, I'm almost done, officer. I was going to ask you, you said that you took my client to the jail, or where?
To the sheriff's office.
Sheriff's office.
Breathalyzer is.
And that's where the breathalyzer is. And you said that he did not want to take the breathalyzer test, correct? Driver refused intoxilizer? Is that what you said?
He did, yes, sir.
And that was after speaking to an attorney, correct?
Yes, sir. I read the implied consent to him, which provided an opportunity to call a lawyer.
Now, for being fair to the jury, implied consent is pretty complicated stuff, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you read him the implied consent, and after you read that to him, as a matter of fact, implied consent involves a statement to the individual that you request that he submit to a test of breath, blood, or urine, or any combination of those tests, correct?
Yes, sir.
And are you reading this off card, or from memory, or from a cell phone? How do you?
We actually have it at where the breathalyzer is located, so I
All
read it.
right, so you're reading it off a piece of paper?
Yes, sir.
Does it not say if you refuse to submit to any test that I request, your refusal may be used against you in court as evidence of your violation of KRS 189A010?
Yes, sir.
Did you explain to Mr. Kasich what KRS 189A010 is?
I did not explain
All
it to
right.
him, no, sir.
And your driver's license will be revoked if you're convicted of violating KRS 189A010. Your refusal to submit to the test will subject you to a mandatory minimum jail sentence that is twice as long as the mandatory minimum jail sentence that would be imposed if you submit to all the required tests. You tell them that?
I read the implied consent. as it's-
Okay, and that's exactly what it is.
Yes, sir.
But do you have any idea if he understood anything you were telling him?
He did not say he did not.
All right. And it goes on, I'm not gonna go on with it, but after you read the implied consent, does the law not mandate that you then to say to the individual, you now have at least 10 minutes, but not more than 15 minutes to attempt to contact and communicate with an attorney? Is that what the law is?
Yes, sir.
And then you said, do you wish to contact an attorney at this time, correct?
Yes.
And the reason for him to contact an attorney is to do what?
To obtain legal advice on what he should do.
And did he call an attorney?
He did.
Did you give him your cell phone?
I don't recall.
Did he have a cell phone?
I believe he did.
Did he have any problem dialing up and calling his attorney?
I don't believe so.
He talked to him, didn't he?
Yes, sir.
And when he got off the phone, did he not tell you that I just spoken to my attorney and he told me not to take the breath test?
That's what he told me.
Thank you so much, officer. I don't have any further questions.